The opening question, "How long, O Lord?" of Psalm 13 immediately identifies it as a lament. When Lord or God is printed in all capitals, it is because it translates the divine name Yahweh. But somewhere in Israel's history, they stopped pronouncing the divine name out of reverence, and instead said Adonai, which means Lord. This ends up working well poetically with this phrase, "How long, O Lord?" because how long is Ad Anah, and so together with Adonai sounds like this, Ad Anah Adonai. The Adonai comes 4 times in the opening 2 verses, punctuating these questions with a sense of mounting despair. The psalmist is again afflicted somehow. Because of his worry about dying in verse 3, some guess he is ill. Illness in the ancient world must have been a considerably more frightening prospect than it is now, given the lack of proper medical knowledge and treatments. As always, the concern is not just with death itself, but the idea that enemies would prevail, either because they are the cause of this trouble, or because they would understand this sickness as divine punishment, or at least abandonment. In any case, the death of the psalmist would be a source of joy and celebration for his enemies. This thought itself is unbearable. The psalmist, having expressed his grief and thrown his wailing questions at the Lord, now lays them aside and remembers his relationship with God. He has trusted in him before. He will therefore look forward to a future salvation. He decides, despite his situation, to sing to the Lord because of the past times the Lord has been abundantly good to him. His previous lamenting was not wrong or inappropriate, but because this psalmist has a long history with God, a relationship he can reflect on with gratitude, it now holds him up in expectation and joy in his time of significant trial. Psalm 14 was obviously a popular psalm because it appears again in the Psalter, in the second collection. The Psalter is comprised of 5 books. The first collection runs from Psalm 1 to 41, and the second from Psalm 42 to 83. Psalm 14 reappears in the second book as Psalm 53. Apart from a difference in verse 5 of Psalm 53, they are the same. This psalm is also notable for being a key part of Paul's argument in Romans as he unfolds the depths of the gospel. He uses it to show that there is no one righteous at all, not even amongst the Jews, let alone the Gentiles, and that therefore all are condemned before God and desperately need his mercy in a salvation which only he can provide, and thankfully has provided in the death of his Son. The quote appears from Romans 3:10 onwards, and Paul chains onto it several other psalms, including Psalm 5's imagery of open graves, to compose a thoroughly miserable picture of mankind's dismal state. The opening words speak of fools who say in their hearts, "There is no God." Such a sentiment is at home in wisdom literature such as Proverbs. We saw in Psalm 11 how the Lord gazes from his throne in heaven and tests the hearts of men. And we also saw the futile arrogance of those in Psalm 12 who claimed they had no master who could restrain their self-indulgence at the expense of the poor. The person who thinks God does not see, that his life and thoughts go unnoticed, that there will be no accounting for them, is a fool. As Proverbs states, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." For a fool, there is no point or use to knowledge, wisdom and instruction, because there is no final reckoning to escape, and such things only divert energy away from the immediate satisfaction of personal urges. The biblical fool, then, thinks that there is no God, or if there is, that he does not see or does not care. It all amounts to the same thing, a practical atheism. To borrow Paul's phrase from Philippians 3, their God is their stomach. A biblical fool, therefore, is not necessarily a stupid person. They may be someone brilliant like Stephen Hawking. Knowledge is a prized aspect of wisdom, but only as it is ultimately contextualized or relativized in relation to the source of reality, God. Knowledge can be used as an escape from God, a Tower of Babel. As in Psalm 11, so here in verse 2, God looks down at humanity from his throne in heaven, this time searching for anyone who is wise, who searches back for him. It is reminiscent of his evaluation of Sodom, looking for a single righteous person. Wisdom is sometimes personified as a woman in Jewish writings, both in the Bible and some writings which came after the Old Testament. She is portrayed as walking around a city, pleading with the passing inhabitants, offering them knowledge, and with it life and security. But her invitations and warnings go on unheeded. This psalm has something of the feeling of her frustration. You can find so-called Lady Wisdom in Proverbs 1, verses 20 to 33, and chapter 8. And if you have a copy of the Apocrypha, in Sirach 24, otherwise known as Ecclesiasticus. Once again, and seemingly out of nowhere, as in Psalm 12, the poor are highlighted as the ones who are suffering the general iniquity. The psalm ends with a plea for deliverance from Zion. He looks forward to the Lord restoring Israel's fortunes. Perhaps at the time of writing there was some particular hardship where it felt as though God had removed some of his blessing and protection. The natural inference is that the levels of sin and general disinterested God had reached a high pitch. It was widely thought that verse 7 reflected the Babylonian exile, and some translations read something like, "Return the captives," rather than "restore the fortunes." Whichever is right, the sentiment is the same.